Come, Lord Jesus, come to my life. Come, Lord Jesus, come, fill my heart. Bring your light to my day, bring your hope to my night. Come, Lord Jesus, come to my life. Come, Lord Jesus, come to our lives. Come, Lord Jesus, come, fill our hearts. Bring your light to our days, bring your hope to our nights. Come, Lord Jesus, come to our lives.
My name is John Aloysius Kwoka. I was born here in Camden, New Jersey on February 7, 1930, in a house on Liberty Street. And it was cold, I understand. No heat upstairs. We froze, so did I. And I was the last of 9 children. The first I remember of St. Joseph's Church was how big it was on the inside. It seemed like the roof was part of the sky. And the lights come through the windows. It looked like everywhere there was a light coming through a window, like the sun was by itself in that one particular window. Well, the Mass was all in Latin. There was no dialogue like they have today in English or Polish, but it was all in Latin. And they were great years. And every Sunday till graduation, John Camden and I would be here for the 6 o'clock Mass on a Sunday morning, or any early Mass that we had off from school that the Monsignor was in charge of, had the Mass. And the church has been one of the main things in my life, in my formative years. And having been in St. Joseph's, going through from up to the 9th grade, I was an altar server, an altar boy for, I would say 9 years at least. And the man that I remember the most was our beloved Monsignor Strensky. I remember going with Monsignor Strensky and my friend John Camden for all the services that were held at the Little Servant Sisters complex in Cherry Hill. And that was when they had three nuns at that point in time. That complex was nothing but trees and maybe one little shack. Do I remember school? Yeah. Member of the first kindergarten class. I think it was Sister Mary Beatrice. And it was the old school building, which isn't here anymore, it's the parking lot. When you came into the school through the back door, we were the first classroom on the right. And there were, I would say, 80 kids in the first kindergarten class of St. Joseph's. And I remember nap time with our little blankets and a pillow. And the boys all fought to sleep under the sandbox. We did that until one time the bottom fell out. And of course, we were loaded down with sand, and we never slept under the sandbox again. And Sister Beatrice, she was great from what I could remember. She loved kids. I personally feel today that going back into 1936 or whatever year it was, that she loved children. And she took care of us as if we were her children. Well, you know, our school day at St. Joseph's, of course, we had the first class always was religion. Then we would have the history or geography or mathematics. And then we would break for lunch. It would be a 1 hour lunch period from 12 noon, excuse me, to 1 o'clock. And we didn't have a cafeteria like they had later on. Everybody went home for lunch, other than some of the students brought brought their lunch with them. And one of the nuns from the school would more or less be our monitor while they ate their lunch in school. But we walked home, had our lunch, and walked back. And our playground during that lunch period was Liberty Street, from Mount Ephraim Avenue to 10th Street. And how those neighbors put up with us for that 1 hour, I'll never know, because there was nothing more than noise. And we used to have baseball games on that street. Try playing baseball, hitting the ball, running the bases, with kids playing jumping rope, hopscotch. That was one great big playground from Mount Ephraim Avenue to 10th Street. And it was when the nun would come out around 1:45 and ring the bell. We'd all run and line up in front of school and be marched in. First grade to the 8th grade. And again, I remember the pulpit. As I speak, I remember the pulpit. That was where the break is in the church, and the priest climbing the steps to get up into that pulpit. And I remember, I don't know if I was in kindergarten or what class I was in. I climbed up them steps into that pulpit, and man, I looked around and I figured, wow, how big that church is from inside this pulpit. And I remember coming here with Mom and Pop, sitting in the pews with them, and that priest up in that pulpit. All he needed today is, I think, would be a stick to be a baton, and he could lead the congregation. And I remember one time when I was younger, sneaking up them steps, and I looked around at the top of that pulpit, and wow, how big this church was, or is. I remember the various processions we had. And I imagine, I don't remember if the kindergarten class took part in any of those processions, But I remember first grade, second grade, etc., when we would be in a procession of Easter. Everybody in that procession, I'm talking about the kids in school, had a plant. It would have either been a lily, a tulip, or whatever, any other plant that was for the Easter season. And I remember walking around inside and outside around the church, and then bringing them flowers in the procession and placing them on the altar rail. Well, we didn't do it, but somebody took the flowers from us and put them on the altar rail and in the altars. They were the great days. And then in the second grade, when I started as an altar server, second grade. Yeah, the second grade. And I remember walking with the cassock, a black, what color was it? Oh, red cassocks. The first ones who were younger altar boys, red cassocks, white surplices, and stiff collars, the Buster Brown type. They were murder, especially in the summertime. And we were glad when the services were over, we could take that collar off and breathe. And that was when we had 8 altar boys, 4 on each side of the altar, between the altar and the steps. And I should say the communion rail and the altar. And then at the altar there were 6 altar servers. 8 and 6. At that time there would be 14 altar boys at the altar. I remember serving Mass for, I can't remember the priest's name before, other than Monsignor Strensky. And I started to remember them when Father Vinovich was here, Father Pinkowski, Faber, and a few others. And I remember as an altar server, when Johnny Kamiach and I would accompany Monsignor Strensky after every midnight Mass in St. Joe's, which would, the midnight Mass we would serve would be over with approximately 2 in the morning. And we would be here back at the church at approximately 5 in the morning. And Monsignor Strensky, John Kamiach and I would go to the Little Servant Sisters in Cherry Hill and have a Christmas morning Mass for the 2 or 3 nuns that were there. And I remember after the services, the nun would come out with 3 cups, hot milk. And that turned my stomach. I couldn't drink hot milk, especially when they got I don't know what they would call it in English, but in Polish we called it a kozuk. And Monsignor Strensky loved the kozuk. So he got our milk, and he got that, to me, the scum off the top, And he gobbled that down like it was going out of style. I remember we were doing something down in the lower parish hall. I forget what we were doing, but anyway, somebody scared one of the nuns. And she let out a blood-curdling scream. I could hear it today. And we were laughing so hard. And when it was all over, all the laughing and all of that, we got pokuta. 1,000 times, I think it was, I will not laugh at the teacher, or whatever it was. We learned our lesson, but if the opportunity presented itself, which it did, we did it again, and we did it again. But they were the good years. And I remember Friday afternoon movies in the upper parish hall. The boys had to go up and set up all the chairs up in that upper parish hall, set up the camera, and get the projection machine in order so they could have the movie start at 1 o'clock. That was every second Friday. We would have movies. And those that couldn't afford the 10 cents, I think it was a dime, had to stay in school. They didn't get in for free. And they would be in school, and it would be the fact they couldn't go home. They had to stay in school, and they either studied or just sat around, did nothing. But they couldn't get in to see the movie because they didn't have the dime. And a lot of times we would all chip in so some of them could get that 10 cents to come up and watch the movie. There have been some great changes made to St. Joseph's since 1945, when I left here as a student. The buildings haven't changed, the church hasn't changed, but the convent has been taken down. The grammar school, where 8 years of my life were spent inside that building, that's gone. The 9th grade, which is still here, it's in the parish hall. I remember when they redid the remodeling of the lower parish hall, where they took out the entire floor and put a new wooden floor down. I remember that because I was in, that was when I was in school. And I remember our library being down in the basement. And in my 9th grade, up on the first floor, we had 2 classrooms, academic and the other was commercial. The 2 classrooms were on the 10th Street side of the building. And across the hall, where there are meetings now, there was the chemistry lab room. And where the pews are now in that room and the altar, that was a library. It was our library, and it was used during the Second World War for making packages for all the men of St. Joseph and women who were in the armed forces. We would send out a letter to them once a month, and at Christmas, and I believe their birthdays. But anyway, it was twice a year that we would make up packages for those who were in the service. That's in the room I'm talking about is where the chapel is today. Then I understand that, and I do remember the library being up in that where the chapel was. They moved that downstairs into the first room as you come in from the front. As you get to the bottom, to the left. That room was the library. And I remember donating a full set of books authored by Mark Twain to the library, the St. Joe's, and of course they were pleased to get them. And those books, I remember, in a courier post, they would have a coupon once a week for his volume, and it cost you 25 or 50 cents for the book. But anyway, we collected his entire library of books that Mark Twain wrote. I believe there were something like 15 or 20 volumes. And whatever happened to them books as a result, I don't know. And whether the kids used them or not, I don't know. But I believe they did. It's a shame that all the people that have went through the doors of St. Joseph's Church from the day they were born to the present, if they're still around, the good times that were always held and had here in St. Joseph's. It seems that they forgot about us. We don't exist anymore. And the only time they know we're around as a parish is when they come back to be buried. It's a shame. But I guess it's because they live such a distance away, they just don't have the time to come here. So their last ride, half of the time, of those being buried, is the last ride for them for their visit here to St. Joseph's. But I come here every time. It doesn't bother me. Of course, white flight had a lot to do with the change in the neighborhood. But I imagine that's what they call progress, and it's not progress, it's regress. They don't know what they're missing. And when they do come back, I don't know if they can see through the casket.
Come, Lord Jesus, come to my life. Come, Lord Jesus, come, fill my heart. Bring your light to my day, bring your hope to my night. Come, Lord Jesus, Lord Jesus, come to our lives. Come, Lord Jesus, come, fill our hearts. Bring your light to our days, bring your hope to our nights. Come, Lord Jesus, come to our lives. Keep me, Jesus Christ, in your love. In the storm of my life, safe and warm. Stretch your hands out to me. Please extend here your peace. Now I know that you are what I need. Keep us, Jesus Christ, in your love. In the storm of our lives, safe and warm. Stretch your hands